today. As it says on our website, the Pine Township Democratic Committee is a small group that does big things. In addition to volunteer work and voter outreach, we've made it a priority to provide a series of speaker presentations. And we're proud to present today's discussion by a resident of Pine Township. James Lucot Jr. is a distinguished Holocaust scholar and educator dedicated to preserving the memory of the Holocaust and combating anti-Semitism through education. With degrees from Duquesne University, the University of Notre Dame, and Gratz College, he has spent his career deepening his expertise and sharing knowledge with students and communities. An adjunct instructor of Holocaust studies at Butler County Community College, James has studied the Holocaust extensively across Poland, Israel, Greece, Austria, the Czech Republic, and Germany. He completed the prestigious Yad Vashem International Holocaust Study Program in Jerusalem and participated in specialized training at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C., as well as at Columbia University, where he was an Alfred Lerner Fellow Scholarship recipient. His dedication to Holocaust education has earned him numerous accolades, including being named International Holocaust Educator of the Year by the Jewish Federation for the Righteous, and Teacher of the Year by the Holocaust Center of Pittsburgh. He was also part of the Pennsylvania Teacher of the Year induction class of 2015. James is actively involved in initiatives that address contemporary anti-Semitism. He was nominated by Righteous Among the Neighbors for his efforts in standing against anti-Semitism, particularly in response to the October 27, 2018 attack on Pittsburgh's Jewish congregations. His insights were featured in the Meetings of October 27th archive, an oral history project documenting the impact of the Tree of Life attack. And he also attended the trial related to the attack. Through his work with Classrooms Without Borders and other educational initiatives, James continues to inspire future generations to learn from history and stand up against hate. Please join me in welcoming James Lucot Jr.
One thing I'm not good at is technological issues, so we got that. I made this for you. Address it if you have one of those. But I speak about a lot of different subjects related to Holocaust and history, and then when Allison asked me to do this, I thought it was interesting. It's something that's been in the back of my mind. I see parallels, and for a while I waited till people smarter than me made the parallels too and made them public, and so I knew that my biases weren't coming into it. So in preparation of this, it was very, very difficult for me because I couldn't estimate how much time I would need to prep, because to try to be as accurate and factual as I could possibly be, so much different misinformation and so many quote alternative facts, it took me a very long time to find out what was actually true and wasn't, if it was actually said and when it was said. And in some cases it was never said and attributed, and it was very, very difficult, very, very hard, and I'm trying to be as accurate and as factual as I possibly can be in the things that I use. So I did my best to source everything I show you here tonight, but I'm open if something isn't accurate or if it's no longer accurate. It could be in the last 24 hours something have changed. But I tried to do the best that I could. So anyhow, this is my uncle, and this is who I named him. When I was a little boy, my grandma, he died in World War II. So my point is I don't have any memories without World War II. I was 4 years old, and World War II has been in my life all the time. So some people ask me why I do this, and I'm not really sure, but I think that has something to do with it. And then I've been very fortunate. When I was 18, 19 years old, I would read about Holocaust survivors in Squirrel Hill, and then I would just go try to meet them, and that's what I did my whole life. So I had a lot of Holocaust survivor friends, and they became my friends, and so I think that's why I did it too. So that information is significant to you, but that's my friend, Mr. Chandler. We took that picture in Auschwitz, and he's still alive. It gets emotional when I talk about this, but I promised them that I would do this for the rest of my life. So when people call me and ask me to speak, I always say yes, yes. I'm not loud enough. I don't have that problem. Well, it's only when I get emotional, all right? So anyhow, Mr. Chandler, They just want their story to be told. And so I promised them that I would do this for the rest of my life. So anytime people ask me, so that's what I do. So so when I get into the minutia of the Third Reich, I don't know how much background you have. I'm not used to speaking to a vast group that has such diversified information. Some of you might have a significant knowledge of the Third Reich and the Weimar Republic. But it was a democracy. It was a representative democracy, just like we have. One of the problems was, though, it had about over 40 political parties. So that's different than ours. And so there would be coalitions and factions, and they would be making alliances. And it was a weak constitution. If you look at some other governments, like we tried when we did that in Iraq, and our constitution is strong because we have 250 years behind it. We all agree to the rules. We have plutonium and uranium, which defends it around the world. So our constitution is strong, but weak constitutions are ripe for takeover. So they were very constitutionally weak in the sense that they had the ability, their leader, their president, and I'm going to use American terms when I discuss that, because Hitler was vice chancellor, it was like vice president, he was chancellor. But they could rule by decree, which means you can circumvent Congress. So when our president of the United States makes executive orders, which both parties do, all right, when they make executive orders can't change laws, executive orders can't allocate funds, and they can't reverse any existing law. So, and they're also contested by the courts all the time. So you see the current executive orders. I'm sure you know that Obama made a lot of executive orders, but I think in history, and I try to think of this today, I can't think of any time in history that the President of the United States used executive orders for personal vendettas. It's always to advance policies or advance promises that they made, but you can see now the courts are striking down a lot of the executive orders that are being made today, but it takes time for the courts to keep up when so many are happening. But in the Weimar Republic, you could rule by decree. So that is a very, well, it's the antithesis of a representative democracy. So they had a lot of hyperinflation. They came off the Great Depression. It hit them worse than us. They had 50% unemployment. Anytime you look around the world and you see a poor democracy, you know it's ripe for takeover. I make this analogy all the time. If I told you gas was $10 a gallon and I took away your cell phones and we took away the little things that we like, we'll be out in the street too demanding change. All right, so we have the things we like, and as long as we have the things we like, and we have gas, and we have our phones, and we have Netflix, and we have the things that we like, we're okay. But when you're pushed, like when people have to go to the streets because they can't get the basic necessities of what they want, then you're going to have extremes. And they had extremes. So what you want is this. In a representative democracy, you want something like that. And so you will always have extremes, but the majority will keep in check the extremes. Now, the one thing that happened with the current president, he married the moderate Republicans with the extreme, which I never thought that would ever happen. And on the flip side, Hillary Clinton attempted, because Bernie Sanders was getting so much support from the far left, Hillary went further out on the bell curve to try to get those far left, but she lost the middle. You understand? I don't think in history that I can think of that someone was able to marry the moderates and the extremes into one voting bloc. I mean, in history, you go back and you look, FDR was able to bring in labor and farmers and minorities and make a voting coalition. Well, the coalition that supports the current president is one like I've never seen. So when you have far extremes that are tolerated by the middle, then you have alarm should go off, if that makes sense to you. Because in a representative democracy, the majority in the middle should keep it in check. For instance, if you remember when the KKK would march in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Pittsburgh. And so the KKK, they would apply for a permit, and then they would go in front of the county building, and 14 of them would march around a circle, and then 2,000 people would protest them in Station Square. Do you understand what I'm saying about balancing out the extremes? That's how it's supposed to happen. But when the extremes get recognition, democracies become at risk. So here's are some of the things that pulled down the Weimar Republic, and when they were facing all those, when you're facing massive economic problems, you're facing massive unemployment, you need an answer. You need someone that will tell you what you want to hear. And I don't want to be simplistic with you, but I do this sometimes with high schools. I don't know any, I know Alice, all right? And I know her very limited time, correct? What's your favorite word?
What's my favorite
What
word?
is your favorite word in the English language?
One of them is democracy.
No, it's not. I know it's not. It's not. Your favorite word is Allison. You understand? And that's what your grandma probably said. Allison, you're beautiful, and Allison, you're so pretty. And it's when you buy a new car. Hey, Allison, what are you looking for? Hey, Allison, what color car are you? Allison, what are you doing for a living? Come on up here, Allison. You like to hear it, and that gives you. Hitler was like the grandmother that gave everything what they wanted to hear. He told them that they were the best. He told them that they deserved everything. He told them that they should benefit more economically than anybody else. And he came along at the right time with the right message. Now, he didn't create any of that. All those messages were there before, but he was more vibrant at the time, and it fit at the moment. I don't want to jump around. I want to stay in a semblance of chronological order and see if you can make the parallels. So when the Third Reich took over, you had a very old president. They did not have a majority in the election. The Nazi Party was actually losing votes. They were losing seats in the Reichstag. Hitler never ran. Sometimes you see that Hitler came to power and democracy, and that's true, but he never ran. So the Social Democrats had an option. They could align themselves with the communists, or they could align themselves with the Nazis in order to get the office. They made the decision to align themselves with the Nazis, thinking that they could control them, get the office, and then rebuild this government. Well, Hitler was not going to take that without getting something for himself, so he basically got himself appointed vice president. So he was appointed vice president, the president dies, Hitler takes power, and then Hitler makes the Enabling Act, which means he just dissolves Congress, and means whatever comes out of his mouth is law. And that's what happened. So when you talk about executive order, that's not law. Actually, executive order is not constitutional. It's not constitutional, but the courts have backed it up over the years, so we accept it. We accept executive order. But that's not ruling by decree, but that's what they had. So, and then you see when they take over, you can see the parallels that I'm showing you here now. Why did the Third Reich fail? It was chronically hampered by cronyism. He appointed, the older you were in the party and more loyal to him were the highest ranking jobs that you got. And people were completely not qualified for the jobs that they get. So when I see some of the appointments to the federal government and appointments to the cabinet, and I see that they're not qualified at all, that alarms me. And I used to make jokes all the time that if you appointed me director of the Pittsburgh Ballet, about 5 minutes people would know I have no idea what I'm talking about. And some of the people that are getting appointed seem to be closer to that than qualified to do the jobs they're getting. So that's one thing. Well, I don't want to go through all these things, but we can do that. But you can see he gave very broad and vague orders. He would give this vague order to multiple people and let them go off and see who did it first and then who did the best and go with that person. And he played people against each other. And it was very disorganized, and the people under him were chronically fighting to try to be his best friend, be highest with him. Martin Bormann, Goering, Himmler, they were all playing against each other, Goebbels, to try to get his affinity, all right? So, again, I want to talk to you, listen, I want to talk to you about this. We're talking about Nazi Germany, the Third Reich, as a political entity, not Holocaust. This is politics. And this is 1933 to 1939, nothing to do with concentration camps or anything like that. Hermann Goering was a pilot in World War I. He was a fighter pilot, which is significant. And when he was done, when the war was over, he tried a lot of different things, including at one point he was flying in a circus. He was in a flying circus, and giving free flights, flights and stuff like that. He was not qualified to be Secretary of Defense. And Hitler not only made him Secretary of Defense, he created a rank that made him higher ranking than everyone in Germany. And if you know the history of Germany, you have Prussian generals that were trained like at 8 years old. And they were the best generals that you can imagine at that time. But he promoted Goering because Goering was loyal to him from day one. And he also gave Goering multiple political titles that he was not qualified for. So when I saw this appointment for Secretary of Defense, and I'm a civilian, so when I saw this person as Secretary of Defense, it was alarming to me because You know, if you look at past secretaries of defense in American history, we have very, very interesting and performing people, combat officers, generals, and Robert McNamara, who was probably the smartest person of his generation, and they all had extensive criteria. I looked it up. He was a major, and he was never in combat. And a major in a combat role commands at most 1,200 people, which he never did. And so the joke in World War II history amongst historians is the German army was moving on the words of a corporal, because Hitler was a corporal, which is the second lowest rank. And now our entire fighting force, the #1 fighting force in the whole world, is operating under a major. That alarms me. And then this one, I looked her up. Now, I've seen her wrestling. I don't support wrestling, and I debated showing you films of her in the ring, literally wrestling with wrestlers. She has no education degree. She's never taught at any level. She's never published, and she has no advanced degrees. How is she remotely qualified to be the Secretary of Education? So this reminds me of that crony. That's a parallel. And how do you transfer from a democracy to a military dictatorship? That scares me too. And one other appointment that I was alarmed by was Matt Gaetz to be the Attorney General of the United States. And you guys might be smarter than I know, but a lot of people don't exactly know what the Attorney General is. And the Attorney General is the top cop in the land. The Attorney General of the United States is the #1 cop in the whole country for you and me. And that means if the President of the United States breaks the law, he goes after the President of the United States. And Matt Gaetz was going to be our Attorney General, and that was not tolerable. So the system did hold it up. And he's no qualifications to be the Attorney General compared to other Attorney Generals in American history. That's my point. So I don't know how much you know about the end of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, but the Treaty of Versailles was brutal. The Treaty of Versailles was basically just a fuse for World War II. But we really, it was the worst divorce you could imagine. But we made Germany admit that they were responsible for the war. They lost land, they weren't allowed to have a military. We really, really rubbed their noses in it. So they weren't allowed to have any type of military. So what does Hitler do? He rearms, and the world does nothing. The world does nothing. And he outlaws political parties that he's against, and then immediately he goes after free speech and the right to assemble. That alarms me. And now, when you see that the Associated Press is not even allowed in the White House, I mean, I have it here, and this is a quote I use. A free press is dependent on democracy, and democracy is dependent on protecting the free press. You can't have one without the other. They're cyclical, all right? And there's been many times in history where presidents were really angry with reporters. I mean, Harry Truman wrote a reporter and wanted to fight him. And he wrote a letter to him because he wrote a bad review of his daughter's opera singing. And Truman wanted to fight him, all right? So there was a lot of people who were angry. You could be angry at a reporter. You could even get angry being in a newspaper. I mean, I'm sure Nixon was no fan of the Washington Post, but you can't attack the whole free press. And this is so representative of Hitler. And as a matter of fact, fake news is actually the Nazi thing. When I hear fake news, there's no such thing as fake news. I mean, there's skewed news, there's slanted news, but there's not fake news. There's liable, which is a lie, but what fake news doesn't make any sense to me. It's nonsensical. But that's what, I'll show you what the Nazis did with that. But a free press is mandatory in a representative democracy. If you do not have facts, you have no rule of law, and without that, you cannot have a democracy. If we don't all agree, and I try to say this to students when they start this, if I come to your house and play Monopoly, we don't have to get the rules out. We all know the rules, and we all agree. I make a social contract with you that I'm going to play by the rules. Now, how much do you put in the middle for free parking?
0.
You don't put anything in? That's no fun. How much do you put in? You don't put anything in? No. Does anyone put $50 in the middle for free parking? Thank you. All right? Okay. But that's not in the rules, right? But we socially agree in this social contract. Now, if I pass go and I take $500 out, you're not going to want to play with me. Do you understand? So a lot of the American government, a lot of representative democracies, there's custom. It's not a law, it's custom. We agree to play by these rules. But when someone doesn't play by the rules, then alarms should go off. And if you abandon those facts, then you're going to be abandoning freedom. So I explained to you executive order already. I love this with the two screens. I explained to you executive order already. Manipulation of democratic customs. When the current president talks about running for a third term, that's comedic to me. I mean, he swore an oath to defend the Constitution for you and me, and distinctly in the Constitution, it says that you can't do that. So what does he say? I read it today. He said, I'm not joking. I have the quotes here. I'll read them to you. But he said, I'm not joking. I'm not joking. There are ways to do it. And I don't want to be extreme, but this is how I talk in class. Yeah, there are ways that a president could be a president for a third term. Nuclear attack, anarchy, or a constitutional amendment. And I think that's what will happen in that order. Because we're not going to have a constitutional amendment for a third term. That's not going to exist. And so even to talk about that's a waste of time and energy, but it's a diversion. What else can I say? Well, you can see how the Supreme Court is politicized. Hitler attacked the courts and basically he took away jury trials and the judges had to be Nazi Party members. You also notice today we have totally uncontrolled campaign spending. And I'm sure, I'll never ask anyone's age, but I'm sure you can remember when you could run for president for $20 million. All right, and the most you could give to a candidate was $5,000. And they had to go politic. And they had to hold babies and kiss them and go to the diners and do the handshaking. Well, now you don't have to do that. And when Obama spent $600 million on his campaign, that blew my mind. I never thought I'd see a Democrat ever outspend the Republican. It was always, if you remember matching funds, Democrats would always be possibly matching funds, and I think George Bush was the first to go over 100 million, George Bush the second, and then Obama went to 600 million, and I read that Hillary spent over $1 billion on her campaign, and we have no idea what Trump is spending because the Citizens United laws, I don't know, and I looked it up. I mean, Elon Musk gave him at least $277 million, probably over $3 million. That can't be legal, but it is, because of Citizens United. And you can ask yourself if you know what that is, and if you don't, that's okay. But the majority of people I meet have no idea what Citizens United is. And it's a Supreme Court case that says how you spend your money is free speech. So I can only give the candidate $5,000, but I can give his super PAC $500 million, which they can use to buy commercials. And you remember when commercials were in presidential elections, it was tactical where you ran your commercials. You couldn't afford them. They would run them at often 7:59 and 11:01 because they couldn't afford prime time. Well, now there's cities in America where all the commercials are purchased. Every one. And I keep track of this sometimes. I teach government politics, and sometimes I'll turn the news on at 6 and I'll put CNN, and at 6:30 I'll put Fox, and at 7 o'clock I'll put MSNBC, and I'll keep track of how many times I see the commercial. All right, there's times where I've seen the commercial 11 times in 1 hour in my viewing. So how many times are they running it for me to see it on 3 different channels? The money is endless, and if commercials didn't work, they wouldn't use them. So when you see uncontrolled campaign spending, because I'm teaching the progressive era now, and I predict in the next decade we're going to have another progressive era because we need new laws. There's no way that private citizens should ever give someone $300 million for running president. It's just that's not a representative democracy. Because now I can't tell you that you can't buy an election because you can't. So you undermine the electoral process when you say it's fake and rigged, when it's not, and you know it's not. And then you can see the bottom when you eliminate diversity and equality in education, because then you're attacking another group and you're making them another. And when you make it, there is no other. We are all created equal in a representative democracy. JFK said if one person's vote is infringed upon, we have no democracy. So if you're making someone or alienating someone into an other, then you're doing exactly that. And I'll make that parallel for you. So that is the most recent thing that I could find, and that's how much money is being given out in super PACs by individuals. That's haunting to me, that you can give that much money. And no one's going to give away $300 million without expectations. And I guarantee you that if you didn't give $300 million, you wouldn't be getting Tesla commercials on the lawn of the White House. Right. So, disrespect for democratic norms. Like I said to you with Monopoly, we both agree and we play by the rules and the rules that we know. Everybody knows what the democratic rules are. This is the beer hall push. And when I see this, it scares me, all right? So on May 20th, 2024, Donald Trump posted a video saying he dreamed of a unified Reich, unquote, dreamed of a unified Reich. If I was running someone's campaign, I would definitely say that we're not going to use any Nazi-esque words and anything that can be relayed back to us, but that was it. And then to his chief of staff, he said, quote, Hitler did some good things. That alarms me. So then he did an interview in Iowa in 2023. And in that interview, he acknowledged that he owns a copy of Mein Kampf. All right, I own a copy of Mein Kampf. I bought it used because I didn't want anyone to get any publishing. So I bought it used, and I've read it, and it's horrifying. So he owns a copy of Mein Kampf. But he stated he never read it. So let's just think of the origin. I always look at things and what is the origin of it? Why did this happen? So I couldn't find another time where they ever asked any US politician, let alone president, if they owned a copy of Mein Kampf. So why are we even having this discussion? Well, when you say when you dreamed of unified Reich and Hitler did some good things, well, that's going to be a question coming up. Then he said he kept a book. No, he didn't say this. His wife did in 1990. He said he kept a book of Hitler's speeches in his bedside cabinet called My New Order, and he did read it. His wife said that, his first wife. And I think it's significant because in 2023, he denied reading it. So I don't understand why you have to do this and why that's even a subject. But if you're going to use this Nazi-esque vernacular, you're opening yourself up to these discussions. So. Then he said, I'll be a dictator, but only for one day. Okay? That's not even humorous to me because you take an oath to defend the Constitution, and our existence, our Constitution, this whole country exists to fight dictators. My uncle died stopping a dictator. So we should scream, the elected president of our country should run from any type of dictatorship. And some of them have. There have been presidents in the past that had opportunities to have more power than they took, and they did not do it. Now, the beer hall push, this was, I think, in 1923, and Hitler attempted to seize power. It is in 1923. He attempted to seize power in Munich. So about 2,000 Nazis tried to overthrow the government there. It failed. 4 police officers were killed, and Hitler was arrested and charged with treason. January 6th, by definition, is an insurrection, by definition. Both of them were led by extreme fringe movements. When you talk about the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. Very similar in size. Both were based on perceived political lies. Hitler blamed Germany's defeat on the Jews. And the Proud Boys and Oath Keepers said that there was voter fraud and it was a fixed election. Both proven lies. Completely proven lies. You have over 60 lawsuits that not only reinforced the fact that there was no voter fraud or no rigged election, but it was probably the most thorough, fair election we've ever had in American history because it's just been evaluated so many times. Both gained credibility on repetition, intimidation, and sabotaging democratic institutions. If we don't believe in our electoral system, we're not going to have a democracy. And when you go and tell people that our voting system is flawed, rigged, fixed, whatever, it's not true. It's not. And to be honest with you, I became a poll official. I volunteered and became a poll official with one agenda in mind. Can I cheat this thing? I want to be there and look at this and say, could this be rigged? Could this be cheated? I don't know if any of you work with polls. It cannot. It's a 5-person, it's a 5-check system. You cannot leave the building if there are 2. We had 2 votes in error of 1,400 votes. And we stayed until we could identify why that was like that. You know what I mean? I mean, how, there's no possible, and I love conspiracies. You want to invite me back into JFK assassination? I will, I've read everything. When I was 25, I thought I could solve it.
And
All right?
no signature matches.
Oh.
I get to joke. There's no one who says-
It's so much more efficient than I realized. All right, it was more efficient than I realized. So I love a good conspiracy theory. But a conspiracy of rigging the election in 7 unattached states at the same time is a conspiracy of 50,000 more people would have to be in on this thing. And you know 2 people can't keep a secret in this country. So, and not only that, in JFK, say you had the information that who killed JFK, you could go on media outlets today and make unlimited sums of money. That didn't exist in 1963. All right, so today, if you and I had information that it was rigged, see how much money we could make. All right, that didn't exist then. It's not true. So this, I can't understand how anyone tells me that that's not an insurrection. It's exactly what it was. It was organized. It was premeditated. And some people have told me that it was a protest and we have the legal right to protest. Absolutely we do. I'd fight and die for anyone's right to protest in this country. You can protest. You can have free speech. You can't block commerce. You can't block an entryway to a store. You can't block someone's right of pathway on a sidewalk. That's why when you see protests, you have to move. But you don't go to protests carrying Kevlar, zip ties, bear spray, and so many other weapons that I can't even list. And when you have over 100 people that are in the same group doing it ahead of time, that's premeditated. All right, that's not approved. I explained to you what the Enabling Act is, and this is what allows Hitler to govern by decree. And it's alarming. I'm a big Watergate person, and you know, Nixon, I'm sure maybe some of you remember him, some of you don't, but Nixon was a bright guy. Nixon went to Duke Law School. He's a smart person. But Nixon said he thought whatever he did while he was president, because he was president, made it legal. And I remember that freaked me out. I'm like, this guy thinks he's a king. All right, but he was saying because when he's president, if he did something, because he was president, made it legal. And I hear that same exact thing being said today, and that alarmed me. As a matter of fact, J.D. Vance said this week that judges, I'm quoting, judges are not allowed to control the executive legitimate power. That's exactly what they do. We have 3 branches of government that balance each other out. That's exactly what judges do. That's what's happening now. And he's a lawyer. I don't get that. And also, when Trump defies the court, that is a legal basis for impeachment. Defiance of a court order, which he's done already in his second presidency. So in the 3rd term, he said, quote, I'm not joking. There are methods which could do it, as you know. But he won't elaborate on any specific methods. I think it's a diversion. Hitler said the Reich was going to last 1,000 years. It's biblical, I'll get into that too. But when you talk about being ruler forever, that's an alarm to me. You know, Teddy Roosevelt stepped down, and it's also an insult to George Washington to just say that I'm going to run for a 3rd term. I mean, we had presidents all the way to FDR that did not run for a 3rd term solely out of respect for the President of the United States, George Washington. FDR did it in 1940 because he knew we were at war, and he said, you don't change the rider once the race already started. And what does our representative democracy do? But in 1956, we immediately passed a constitutional amendment that no one will be allowed to do that, so we could prevent a Hitler in our country. All right? So then we get into this thing called the Führer principle, and guys like me get together and you come up with these theories of why did all these Germans follow the law. And the Führer principle is this, and it's also, there's a thing called working towards the Führer. So why did these people do this? And they think it was this thing called working towards the Führer because they wanted to appease him. And those who could appease him more and give him what he wanted to hear would get promoted more. So at times Martin Bormann's the #1 guy to him, and then it'll be Goebbels wants it, Himmler wants it, and Göring will have it for a while, then he won't, and they just worked towards the Führer, all right? So the Führer principle means that Hitler's word is above all written law. And this also means that all government policies, decisions, and officials will serve to realize his will. So think about that. When you take an oath in this country, when you say the Pledge of Allegiance, you're pledging allegiance to that flag, which is representative of the Constitution. We serve a Constitution. When you join the military, you take an oath to defend the Constitution. When you become the President of the United States, you take an oath to defend the Constitution for everyone of us. All right? You don't serve one man. I think it's interesting that in Nazi Germany, the Jehovah's Witnesses went to concentration camp. They're not Jews. The Jehovah's Witnesses went to concentration camp. And the reason why they did is they refused to take the oath. Because if they took the oath to Hitler, that would be putting someone above God. And they wouldn't do it. And it's so odd because the Nazis respected Jehovah's Witnesses, but they still locked them up because they wouldn't take the oath. All right? So we don't serve one man. But the Führer principle is when you serve one man. So I have this. I told you about the third term. 22nd Amendment prevents that. This is the Führer principle. Now, Rudolf Hess, early on, Hess was probably number 2 or 3 to Hitler. When he was in prison, Hess was his number 1 guy. And read those things and you'll see that he is always right. It's amazing, his greatness. He is above us all. He is like a great star above us. That's biblical to me. When you can tap into biblical things, you can bring more people under your umbrella. So the Führer's word is above all written law, and clearly the Führer has a divine blessing. All right, you see where this is leading to. Now that quote, the President of the United States is not above any law, but in his case, because he's president now, he will not be prosecuted. So it's very difficult for me to talk to my biological children and say the President of the United States is just like me and no one's above any law, because he is. I mean, he's a criminal, and he got convicted, and he would definitely be convicted if he didn't win the election. But because he's President of the United States, he's not going to be convicted, so you can get away with it in America. So he will not be prosecuted for his involvement in January 6th or the classified documents case because of the custom of the Department of Justice that prevents indictment or prosecution of a sitting U.S. president. That's that. This statement reminds me of Nixon, it reminds me of Hitler. Because he who saves his country does not violate any law. Well, history will show us that some presidents did violate laws. Abraham Lincoln violated habeas corpus and probably locked up maybe 2,000 Confederate sympathizers that were American citizens. But we look back on him and say he did it for good reasons. We like Abraham Lincoln, but he did that. Teddy Roosevelt locked up thousands of American citizens who happened to be Japanese during World War II. That was bad. That was a bad one. But to say this today at a peacetime, because wars will bring upon different responses from presidents, but this is peacetime and this is alarming to me. That's scary to me. It reminds me of this. That's frightening. And if you remember, did you watch the David Frost interviews?
Yeah.
Okay, he gave me the opportunity to apologize. David Frost said the American people, he wouldn't do it. So the Nuremberg laws were a series of laws that the Germans passed over maybe a decade, which began to strip the Jews of their citizenship. You see, if you saw the deportations this week, you had 2 Colombians, mom and dad, who came here illegally, and they made it, that was a crime. They lived here for 30 years. They reported in with ICE. They raised 3 girls here. They paid taxes. They never broke the law, and they got deported to Colombia. Was that extreme? I don't know. I read today that they deported someone by accident who was there. One way that fascists take over democracies is you create an enemy, and if you create an enemy and you make them small, then it saves you because you can blame all of your problems on one group of people. And whatever problem comes up, it doesn't matter how big it is, just blame it on them. So the Treaty of Versailles and Germany losing the war, it was the Jews. Any kind of diseases, it's the Jews. Economic problems, it's the Jews. Whatever, just, if your team doesn't win gold medals, it's the Jews. It's a blanket. And so we have, I don't know, 20 million, 22 million illegals in this country. I don't know. No one probably knows. But they can't all be racists and gang members and fentanyl dealers and murderers and rapists and all these other things. It would be insane if our country had 20 million rapists and fentanyl dealers. But that reminds me of that. So that's what the Nuremberg laws did. They eliminated them from society. And some of the non-Nazi educated Germans went along with this and said, you know what, let's just sterilize them all. That means that they would still be part of our society. We'll sterilize them, they will die off, and that's a way to deal with it. All right? And some Jews readily went and did that. There were Jews that were married to Christians, and they were told by the Reich that if they wanted to continue the marriage, they'd get sterilized, and they did it. When you mark them and identify them, you're making them an other, and you are creating a vehicle to propel policies amongst your people, and I think that's one way that you can make a voter block and bring people together if you make them think they're better than somebody else. And that's what I think. Doing this is not by chance. It's haunting to me. It scares me. I was just in Fredericksburg, Virginia, about, where's the guy? I was in Fredericksburg at the Civil War tour. Okay? And there's one thing I want to see. They have an actual slave auction block. They have a real slave auction block, so I want to see it. So it's in this museum in the basement, and I saw it. But I saw this picture of it, and it was on a corner in Fredericksburg in 1920s. There was cars on the street. And it was on this corner of the street. And I said, why was it there? And they said, oh, they just kept it there. I'm thinking 1920s. And then I saw a picture of a civil rights protest in 1965 where they had a sit-in. And you can see the slave auction block on the street in 1965. And I thought, did they take it out of the museum and put it back on the street? That slave auction block was on the corner till the 1980s. This is only 5 hours from here. And also they still have separate bathrooms. They don't use them, but I actually saw the separate bathrooms they had. Now, do you know Donald Trump has reversed Lyndon Johnson's 1965 law that says the federal government can't contract any business that has separate bathrooms? So now that's legal again, technically. Blew my mind. I looked this up. The removal of transgenders from the military. Now, if you remember when Clinton had Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And at that time, I was in graduate school, and I had some friends that were officers, academics, officers in the Air Force. And they did not want gays in the military. And they told me, they said, Jim, you don't understand. You don't understand what we're subjected to. It will undermine our morale, and it will lessen our fighting ability. Well, you know that process, and you know under Obama, that all got reversed. And to my knowledge, there's not been one single issue with gays in the military that I could find documented that caused that. This issue, I don't know if you realize how many people were in this case, how many transgender soldiers there are in our military. 6. And there's 2 that signed contracts. So they have a contract to go to basic training. So we're doing all this for 6 people? And listen to the wording of it. Quote, they are banned because they conflict with a soldier's commitment to an honorable, trustful, and disciplined lifestyle that's harmful to military readiness. Six. People theorize of why did the philosophy and ideology stick? And I gave the analogy of, I told you your favorite word and what we like to hear. And so if you have 50% unemployment and you're German and there are immigrants, and the Jews lived in Germany for 200 years, and they were less than 2% of the population. So most of Germans, unless you lived in Berlin or a major city, you would never even see a Jew, all right? So they come up with the blood in the soil. And the blood in the soil is the concept that because of your blood, you are linked to the soil. Because of your blood, you are entitled to the soil. And the threat is that a parasitic race cannot live by itself. So they must go out and infect the superior races so they can procreate and bring down the host body, all right? Because I've gone through diaries and letters of these people that did these actions. And they had this group called the Einsatz group, and these guys were the people who shot Jews before they started gassing them. And I was reading the letters of this Einsatz group and shooter, all right? And he's telling his wife what he does. He's telling, he's writing these passionate letters, and he's like, I'm so sorry, it upsets me, my work. His work is going town to town and shooting Jews. And he said, my work so upsets me, it's so hard, but I know I'm doing it for our family. And he said, I'm doing this for our children. And it really, when you read his letters, you would think he's curing polio. In his mind, what he was doing was for the goodness of his children, protecting his children. So how does that ideology seep in? Well, Hitler needed land. They don't have natural resources. They needed to expand. How will you expand? You come up with this blood and soil idea. And so what he planned was living space. So he was going to expand, and you understand you can't expand. No one's in the game of giving away land. And how does land change in the world? With guns. All right, that's how boundaries change. That's how borders change. And so since Jews were foreigners, their blood entitled them to nothing. They had bad blood. Their blood was infected. Hitler called it racial tuberculosis, the analogy. So when you see this, that it's your mission to defend your blood, meaning you can't interact with someone of impure blood. To join the SS, you had to have 7 years of Jew-free blood. 7 years, with no DNA. How do you do that? I don't even know who my great-grandparents were. How would I know if they were Jewish or not? But they did that. So when I see stuff like this, the purity of the blood, that alarms me. And that's his quote. These people are coming into our country with disease. We don't have a blood of our country. We are all the same. There is no blood. There's no American blood. None. And when I see the vermin mark, and I see the blood mark, do I have this? Yeah. And first of all, I gave you the definitions of different ideologies. You can't be a communist and a fascist at the same time. That drives me nuts. Communists and fascists fought each other in the streets. You can't be both. So when I see these things like this, and he talks about camps, and they're poisoning them, and then he goes on to degrees saying they're coming from Africa and Asia, which you know in American history when we had immigration, if you came from Russia or Germany or Ireland, and you came, that was pretty much okay, but if you came from Asia or Africa because you look different, you have problems when you immigrate. You get that. And so when I see the vermin remark and the poison of the blood remark, maybe one of them could be a coincidence, but I don't believe the combination of both of them, considering the historical magnitude of these meetings. Putting them together pretty much make it clear to me that there's something thematic going on, and I don't believe that's accidental. And I already established that he kept a book of Hitler's speeches next to his bed, which his ex-wife said that he read. So Trump has discussed and compared his use of the word blood. He admits it. He compared it. He said Hitler's use of the word was different than him, unquote. So this is Hitler's idea of living space. They were going to expand, right? And so today, when I heard these things, this is what I told you about the land of the sword, because Hitler knew he couldn't expand without war, and he knew that he could not eliminate the Jews without the umbrella of a war. So you need a war to get these extreme nationalistic actions going. When I see this stuff, that we're going to take Greenland, and we're going to go as far as we have to go, what does that mean? Does that mean guns? I mean, Greenland's not going to give us Greenland, and I don't understand that. That scares me. If you remember, do you remember Ahmadinejad in Iran? Ahmadinejad. Ahmadinejad said that if we're so preoccupied with the Jews, that in the future he'll put them in Alaska. That was his quote, and I thought that's a statement of war, because we're a sovereign nation, and Alaska's our sovereign state. So if he's saying in the future that he's going to put the Jews in Alaska, that means he's taking us out. So I thought that was a statement of war. People laughed at him. And in the 1920s and the early 30s, we laughed at Hitler, and people laughed at him. I didn't like when Ahmadinejad said this. I don't know what this means. I don't understand it. Canada's been our greatest ally. We have that border with Canada, which is completely unguarded. Could you imagine if we had to guard that border, what we'd have to pay? If we had to put military across that border? I don't understand this, and I don't get this. This is so insulting to me. The Panama Canal is ours, all right? Jimmy Carter gave it back in his presidency in 25 years. So Panama, yes, Panama has ownership of the canal, but here's the agreement we made. We get to use it anytime we want, and if we feel it's threatened, we have the right to militarize it anytime we want. So we could put 5 aircraft carriers down there tomorrow and have every legal right to do it. So to imply that China is controlling this, it is a total lie. We don't need to own it. We, in fact, sort of already do. I don't understand that. I don't understand that. So then you create cultural conflicts, all right? And what Germany did was they said, I don't know if you know about kosher, but I used to date a Jewish girl, so I learned a lot about kosher. And It's how you slaughter the animal. And I'm sure you've seen the documentaries of how these slaughterhouses have been really inhumane to these animals. But in a kosher kitchen, the animal must be conscious when you kill it. So they made that out to be that the Jews were torturing the animals, and so this was a way to turn people against the Jews. And then you come up with the stab in the back myth, and what that means is Germany is so great of an army. See, it's hard in Germany because they surrendered, and yet we never stepped foot in Germany. In World War I, they surrendered before the enemy got to Germany. So if you lived in Germany, it's like, wait, how did we lose if the enemy never came into our land? And so that's the stab in the back. So they say, we were winning, but the Jewish politicians back home signed that surrender and stabbed us in the back, which none of this existed, but that's what it was. And when I see this, because this rally, I think, no, see, this is where I'm going to get, I want to make sure I get it right. I think this was at a Ron DeSantis event. That one? Yeah, I think this was at a Ron DeSantis event, and they asked him, what do you have to say about the Nazis in your parking lot? And he wouldn't renounce them. And you've seen Donald Trump multiple times where he said he will not, he doesn't know what the KKK is, and he doesn't know what it is, and he doesn't know who David Duke is, and I had a person come up to me recently, and she said she'd like to ask me some questions about politics. And I said, okay. So I could tell where this was going. And so I said, I can ask you 2 questions. Very simple. I said, where do you stand on rape? And she said, what do you mean? I said, where do you stand on rape? She said, I'm against rape. I said, well, Donald Trump's a rapist. So let's discuss. I said, three juries of his peers declared that he sexually assaulted, which the judge said equals the definition of rape. So that didn't work. She said that didn't happen, never happened, never happened. I said, where do you stand on Nazis? I said, because he eats with Nazis, he has them in his house, he has them at his rallies, he doesn't denounce them. All right, I don't understand that. I didn't understand why Ron DeSantis did this, and when you say this, and when you say that there's good people on both sides, no. Every one of us, regardless of wherever you stand politically, has to be against that, because that's what democracy is against. That's the antithesis of a representative democracy, and that's horrifying. And another thing you do is you erase history. I've been to so many countries where I've seen ruined Jewish cemeteries. Most of them are just a wall and grass, because this is really wild. I went to Mauthausen, and I read ahead of time that they used Jewish tombstones to pave the road. So I wanted to see it, right? So I went there, and I said, I was on the road, and I said, is this the road? And he said, yeah. They didn't use them this way. They used them upright. It's an over 1 mile long road, and the tombstones are upright. That's how they paved the road. So if you destroy a cemetery, you destroy the history. And you know Kristall Knock from the Night of Broken Glass. Well, when you burn a synagogue, the building's one thing, but you're burning the Torah. If you burn the Torah, the Word of God, you burn the synagogue, take away the cemetery, then you erase them. They never existed. And so when you erase history, I just saw today, I think I put it in here. I actually had to go back to this today and change it, because now Trump wants this, he's going to the Smithsonian, and he wants them to teach American form of history, and I didn't get that, but this one really haunted me, and I hope you can give me the time to explain it. I read that Trump administration has ordered dozens of pages of the Department of Defense and Arlington National Cemetery websites to be scrubbed of educational material, gravesite locations, and military accommodations of significant African American veterans, including Jackie Robinson, as well as Hispanics, Asian Americans, and women nurses. Okay, I read that, and I'm sitting at home, and I thought, what? You're going after Arlington? And this is what the Nazis do, right? So there's a man, and just tell me if I'm boring you, all right? There's a Holocaust survivor. He's Hungarian. He survived Holocaust. He got liberated by Americans at Mauthausen, and he said, all I wanted to do was be in the American Army. He said that he was young. So he came to America, and he tried to get in the Army. He couldn't speak English. He couldn't read, and he has a horrible accent. And so he couldn't get in. But then the Korean War started, and they'd take anybody. So he got in. He was so happy to be an American soldier. So he gets to Korea, and he's just treated with anti-Semitism. And the names they call him, I couldn't repeat in this room, but they call him the worst names whatsoever and give him the worst jobs. So he's in Korea, and they got to retreat from this hill. And so 32 men, his sergeant says, Tibor, you stay back here. And he said, I want you to hold them off. Hold a diversion, and we're going to get out. So he has foxholes of like 100 yards long, and he puts carbines and M1s and grenades, and he just runs back and forth for 24 hours. And if anyone's in the military, he's firing carbines, he's firing M1s, so it sounds like a lot of people are doing it. And he holds them off for 24 hours, and gradually he gets captured. So he ends up in a Chinese prison of war camp. I mean, what's it, 5 years, you're in 2 camps, right? Well, 4 Americans testified that they would not have lived if it wasn't for Tibor Rubin, because he used the skills he learned in Holocaust to figure out the system, steal food. He knew their system better than them. And also in Judaism, you know, he believes in the Torah, and the Torah says if you save one life, you save them all. So he thought if I can just save one of them, then I'll be worthy, all right? And so he was nominated for the Medal of Honor. And after the Korean War and in Vietnam, any Medal of Honor that had something to do with the minority was shelved. So when Bill Clinton was president, he ordered all those Medal of Honor applications be renewed and reviewed again. So the guys that were still alive were getting Medals of Honor. And so Tibor Rubin received the Medal of Honor under George Bush. And if you see him, you can't understand a word he says, but he raised 2 daughters. He came back home, he moved to Los Angeles, he became a tailor and some other jobs. He raised 2 children, he paid taxes. I mean, he's exactly what you want an immigrant to be. He loves being American. So George Bush gave him the medal, and they asked him, they said, are you angry you didn't get the medal when you were young? He said, yeah, I am. Because you can get money from the Medal of Honor, you can get jobs and stuff. And he said, I could have used it with girls. That's what people So I'm sitting home and I read this thing, and I get on my phone, and I go on the Department of Defense website, and I get that. That's Tibor Rubin. And they scrubbed him. And I know his daughters look on this, all right? And they scrubbed him off of that, and I don't understand that. Why are we wasting tax dollars and time? And if you want the government to be more efficient, then get these people doing what they should be doing and not wasting time doing nonsense like this. All right, so that's erasing history, and that I don't understand. And Tibor Rubin is not an African American, not a Hispanic, not an Asian American, and not a woman nurse. But they figured out to get him off, and he is a complete American. He's a patriot. 50,000 more times than anyone in the White House. He's a patriot. So that's Crystal Knock. That's the thing that he signed to do that. And then I also read that he's now saying to France that any company that does business with the American government has to follow his DEI program. Yeah, okay. So when Hitler had occupied countries, he expected all the, not even occupied, any country that he expected them to give up their Jews and do that too. Denmark and all the countries. And most countries did, but some didn't. Denmark refused to do it. They won't do it. All right. Book burning is erasure of history. And I get alarmed by book burning, and you people know more about this than I do in the community that you live in, but when they start banning books that I know have nothing to do with anything that they claim, we could do a whole other subject. So big business, obviously Donald Trump's campaign would not exist without those donations that I told you. I think it's interesting because in 2014 he said he was going to pay for his whole campaign himself because he has $10 billion, which he doesn't return, he doesn't show his taxes, so we don't know that. Man, this is really sounding like a beatdown, isn't it? Anyhow, Hitler, the Nazi party was bankrupt. I mean, completely bankrupt. So Hitler invited 25 of the leading German industrialists in 1933 to Berlin in a secret meeting, and that's I.G. Farben, and that basically is Bear Aspirin, and also Krupp. And they were all there, and he told the group, he said, private enterprise cannot be maintained in a democracy. So what did he give them? He said, I'll take out all your labor unions. He said, I'll take care of your labor problems. And not only that, he didn't know it at the time, but he was going to provide them with really cheap labor, Jews, slave labor. So he said he would eliminate the trade unions and the communists, and he asked for financial support. He left there with $50 million in 1933. And if they didn't fund him, this would have never happened. Including American companies, but that's another subject. So, the history of the German industrial support of Hitler shows that what can go wrong when political objectives and the pursuit of profit become dangerously intertwined. All right, so now I understand if I go throw a brick at your car, which I'm assuming is not a Tesla, but if I throw a brick at it, that's vandalism. Or no, check that. And if I throw a brick at a Tesla, that I am now a domestic terrorist. All right, I don't understand that. So I explained to you about gift giving, and when this is just interesting to me. That's Porsche. That's Dr. Ferdinand Porsche, and Hitler loved Henry Ford, and Henry Ford loved Hitler, and Henry Ford is a notorious anti-Semite Nazi, and he wanted a Model T for his people. So he asked Ferdinand Porsche to build him a German Model T, which is the Volkswagen, the people's car, all right? So that's Ferdinand Porsche and Hitler and all the SS behind them, and they're playing around with VWs, right? And so Hitler promised all his workers that they would get a VW. When I saw this, I'm sorry, I just can't laugh at it. I can't understand how we're using the highest office in our land and my house, because I own that house, and we're using my house to do a commercial for a Tesla. I don't get this. How is this being tolerated? How is this being tolerated? It wasn't, I don't understand. And who is the most anti-electric car guy in the land? That guy. I mean, he hates electric cars. Free press. I told you, AP, Reuters, Bloomberg, they're all eliminated from the White House press pool. I don't get that at all. Hitler called the free press the enemy of the people. Trump calls the press the enemy of the people. Fake news, the actual word, and I can't speak German, is Lügenpresse. It's a Nazi slogan. It started in 1848. The Catholics were using it against the liberal press. The Nazis reinvigorated the term. And it basically means any news agency that does not reflect the user's own worldview and must therefore be propagated by a hated other. So the Trump fake news is the leftists and the communists and the fascists and all the other people. It's not that case. You have to create an enemy of the people, the other, the not us. And if you have an other, then that will unify you together. And preferably if the other is small enough, it makes you feel better when you're in the it group and not part of them. Then you can blame your fictional enemy for real or created problems, and this produces a very simple solution to every complicated question. You can just blame them. A solution is no longer even needed to effectively address a problem, but the elimination of those mysterious forces personified by the leader. So Hitler's anti-Semitism produced a simple answer to every complicated question he had. I could do this for hours. The news is not the enemy of the people. A solution is no longer met effectively. You don't have to address a specific problem anymore, and you don't have to eliminate it. Hitler was the Jews and the Bolsheviks. Trump is the illegal immigrants, far-left radicals, communists, and fascists, unquote. NBC, CBS, CNN, he even attacked Fox. And you know as well that Fox is not a news agency. In the Dominion case, they admitted in court that they are an entertainment network. So the sources I use are only sources that print retractions. If the source doesn't print retractions, then that's my personal, I don't accept that as a source. 60 Minutes, New York Times. So enemy of the people, more than ever. And I explained to you in the Dominion case that Fox admitted that they lied, and they also admitted that they're not a news network. So then you purge the civil service. Now, you see this daily. I just read that Bobby Kennedy Jr. is firing 1,200 FDA workers. So the Defense Department, every oversight committee is being fired. There's the two acting directors of the FBI were fired because Trump wanted a list of every FBI agent that investigated January 6th, and they wouldn't do it. So I teach at Butler Community College, and I was having class, and this woman came in, and she said, "I'm sorry to interrupt." And I said, "That's no problem," and she did her thing, and I said, "What do you do?" And she is the head of English as a second language department for the whole community college system. So you know that if anyone has illegals in her class, it's her. And I said, "Where's your funding from?" I said, "Where do you get your funding?" Part of it's from the federal government. So I assumed that English as a second language is going to get cut. And I wouldn't be surprised if they would want to see the rosters of those classes. And so the woman left, and I told my students that I am not turning over any rosters. But I don't think I'll be subjected to that. The script that Donald Trump is following is definitely Project 2025. That was read, it's extremely boring. But Trump said on record, he knows nothing about Project 2025. He doesn't know anything about it. He doesn't agree with it, blah, 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 blah. I could do this over. There's pages of this, and it's virtually identical. It's a script. That's alarming. And then a lot of times you'll use a natural event to gain support. So like with Hitler's World War I or the Treaty of Versailles, the Great Depression, just blame that on the Jews. I see Trump doing that with COVID, blaming it on Asians and China virus, and then you just blame everything on the immigrants. Fentanyl is on the immigrants, and he claimed fentanyl is coming from Canada. There's not one documented case of fentanyl coming over the Canadian border. And as far as I know to this point, you might correct me, there's never been one member of Al-Qaeda or Hamas that's come over the Mexican border. I don't know who these terrorists are that are coming across the Mexican border, but they don't exist that I could find. Carl Schmitt is an academic that I like. He says, quote, "The leader initiates politics by choosing an enemy. The choice of the enemy is arbitrary. It has no little or basis in reality. It takes the force from the decisive will of the leader." And I looked at this, and when you watch Trump's television ads, all right, and during sporting events, no one there has been harmed by any transgender person or an immigrant or a woman of color. Nobody. But that can change you immediately to being them as a threat. And trying to give you a historical example. Do you remember when they said that, well, this was your school district? Wow. You had a bathroom problem at the school that made national news, and you had 2 transgender students that in the spring the school board said they could use any bathroom of their choice, but that made national news, and so the school board stopped that over the summer and said that they're going to have to use a special separate bathroom on the 2nd floor. And I told my students, I said, those parents are going to make massive money because separate is not equal. All right, we all know that. Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, separate is not equal. I don't know if you know this in your district, but the parents did settle for 25 grand. I was like, that's it? I want 25 G's every time my kid couldn't go to the bathroom. All right, but they settled out of court. So what am I getting to? Why is this significant? I don't know. You can't separate. You can't do that. And so the magic lies in the daring it takes to declare a weaker group to be part of an overwhelming conspiracy. These weaker groups are conspiring against us. Many voters are ready to blame a scapegoat or another. Hitler blamed the Jews for Germany's defeat in World War I. Trump launched his 2015 campaign demonizing immigrants from Mexico and continues to put the border security in the front and center. We've had an issue, as a historian, we've had an issue with Mexico since the beginning of time. We've had a problem, we have an immigration problem forever. We've had them coming across the border killing Americans. That happened in like 1914 or 1912, I can't remember. We've had issues all the time. No party has a solution to it. You know, the Democrats want to empower the Mexican economy to make it better so people want to live there and not come across the border. Republicans want to have stronger laws, and someone wants to build a wall. None of that's going to work. We've always had problems. This decomplexifies the world. Instead of abstract social structures and historical developments, you have one specific group of people that you can blame all your problems on. Yeah, we have inspector generals that have oversight, so we have checks and balances, and those are gone. All the FBI agents that investigated January 6th, all the prosecutors in the DOJ that went after him. This is dated already. That's already dated. Look at it in Butler County when they're cutting the VA. That's not going over so well. The VAs are getting cut. My one friend, Jim Dollar, he fought with my uncle in World War II. Colonel Dollar fought in Vietnam, fought in Korea in World War II. I don't know how many years overseas, wounded. I mean, he couldn't fly anywhere. He had so much metal in him, he had to carry a medical file with him to go on a plane. And I asked him one time, I said, what can I do? What's one thing I could do for you? And they don't want parades, they don't want holidays, he doesn't want any medals, he doesn't want any of that stuff. I said, what could I do? One thing he told me is, make it so I don't have to wait so long at the doctors. That's the one thing he wanted. These VA cuts, these people will be waiting days now. Days, maybe more. You guys know the Saturday Night Massacre, when Nixon attempted to fire 2 attorney generals in the middle of the night, which he doesn't have the power to do. And that purge, and Trump had a firing party in his 2016 administration, fired all the people. Well, the Night of the Long Knives is scary to me. And the Night of the Long Knives was, I don't know, between 100 and 200 men, including Ernst Röhm. They made a list. Some people on the list were people that criticized Hitler in public, and they killed them all in one night. They went to the newspapers the next day and said they were treasonists. No SS men involved refused to kill. As a matter of fact, there was over 100,000 requests for the SS membership after Night of the Long Knives. But Trump has purged the federal government of inspectors, oversight officials, staff, Department of Defense, FBI, FDA. I can't even go on. I could spend more time finding what other departments. Oh, the national parks. National parks. Well, you understand that. Propaganda has a lot of inaccurate information over Hitler's history of propaganda, but basically he said that the magic is the big lie. Hitler explained this in Mein Kampf. To tell a lie so big, Hitler said, that people will not believe you, that you would deceive them on such a scale. His biggest lie was of the international Jewish conspiracy, something that he could always blame, something that would always relieve you of your responsibility. There's no evidence of the things that Hitler said about the Jews, none of it, but they believed it. And when I hear America first and MAGA and make America great again, and then I know Germany above all, patriotism is pride in our country. And I put the definitions there for you so you see them. We're all patriotic. Nationalism is when you think that the needs of your country could be more important than the needs of other countries. So if you go to Europe, look for an SUV, because you're not going to find one. All right? We ride around in these big SUVs, and so we're a little nationalistic when it comes to that. Extreme nationalism is when your needs you will sacrifice the needs of other people for your needs. All right, and we have to be alarmed about extreme nationalism. That cartoon on the right is implying that the Jews are behind America and behind the communists, and the Jews control and pull all the strings. And I was raised like that, where the Jews controlled Hollywood and the Jews controlled the banks, and that kind of propaganda. This is Joseph Goebbels, who was Hitler's propaganda minister, and he was extremely talented. But the one thing about Goebbels is, and he had a PhD, Goebbels' diaries exist. So he has you can read about it, like a day-to-day version of Hitler's life. And he writes in there what he bought Hitler for his Christmas and how Hitler liked it, and he writes all this stuff in there. But he also writes that he's convinced that Hitler was sent by God to the Germans. He writes that. Just keep saying it. Now, in the January 6th Commission, that there were people in the White House that testified that Trump knew he lost the election, and he admitted he lost the election. And these rallies, the rally thing freaks me out, all right? Because when I see these rallies on TV, it reminds me so much of the Nazi rallies. So much that Angela Merkel, I think she insulted Trump, because she said, I remember someone else in history that had big crowds at his rallies too. And Trump took that as a compliment. I don't think he understood what Angela Merkel was saying. Angela Merkel's the chancellor, I don't know her title. Germany? Former chancellor of Germany. All right. So this fixation of crowd sizes, that is really Hitler-esque to me. And you never see, I went through, like you see empty spots. You never see the angles that you want to see, and you listen to the themes, and you're convincing your followers that your enemies are everywhere. They're everywhere, but there's actually none. The key to understanding why so many Germans followed along with the Nazis is their complete rejection of the rational, factual world. When you give up the facts, you can believe anything, all right? Now, for 20 years, I've been teaching AP government, politics, to high school seniors. And I tell them that I will give them an automatic 100, I will wash their car, pay for their prom, and take them to Ruth's Chris, if they can prove to me conspiratory voter fraud. Just prove it, all right? And I've been doing this for 20 years. There's no such thing, all right? And Bigfoot is a mystery to me, like these people watch Finding Bigfoot, I'm like, they're not gonna find it, and there's no DNA, and we have these footprints, and there's no skin cells and no hair follicles, and I joke about this. So I actually did this last year in class. I called the Bigfoot hotline on speakerphone in class, and I got the Bigfoot guy on phone, right? And I asked him, do you believe in voter fraud? And he doesn't. So he believed in Bigfoot, but didn't believe in voter fraud. So my daughter plays basketball for Virginia Tech. So I'm in Virginia, and my son and I'm at this cheesy Mexican restaurant at some interstate exit in Virginia. And I'm sitting down innocent. I swear people know. I must have a magnet of people coming to me. And this lady's talking to me, and somehow she gets on the Bigfoot, and she's telling me she believes in Bigfoot, and she has pictures. And her Bigfoot is the Ohio Bigfoot. And the mountains of Ohio. I'm not making this up. And she shows me a picture of Bigfoot, and I go, and she goes, that's not the one I saw. This is my friend. Her other friend. 2 people actually saw Bigfoot. But she shows it to me, and I'm listening to her passionately tell me about Bigfoot. So I look over at my son, and I get his eye, to get his attention. And I said, excuse me. I said, can I ask you a question? I said, do you believe in voter fraud? Oh yeah. She was right on voter fraud. It's like pressing buttons, all right? There's no such thing as Bigfoot. And wrestling is fake, and there's no voter fraud. I'm telling you, I'll give you my American Express card if you can prove it, that it doesn't exist. It just doesn't. There's mistakes. The kids are like, 2 dead people voted in Wisconsin. I said, no, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying conspiratory, across state line voter fraud. Doesn't exist. But people believe it. So what I'm saying to you is if you can get the majority, or the majority of votes you need to believe in something totally not factual, I'm amazed that people watch wrestling and like, and I'm like, it's not real, man. I don't know. I shouldn't tell you these things, but this is what I do. This is why people like me as a teacher. When I was in high school, I dated Joe Negri's daughter. I'm sure if anyone's related. Oh, yeah, I know, and I'm probably going to come back to it. I'm probably going to get insulted. All right, so I'm 21 years old, and Mr. Rogers' neighborhood, and this guy came over, and I met him. Hey, nice to meet you. And met him and everything, and I don't know, he looked like he was like 40 to me, I don't know. And he left, and she said to me, she goes, do you know who that was? And I said, no. And she said, that's Mr. McFeely. And I went, what? I go, that's a wig? It was fake? My childhood came to it. I had no idea that the speed of delivery was not old. And I was so mad. But at least there's a little bit of fact. And we had Nazi rallies in America. I don't know if you know. We had a Nazi party in America in the 30s, 20,000 people in Madison Square Garden. I don't know where those people went to. But Hitler was fixated on crowd size. He loved to have these rallies. It was to the point where he wanted to eliminate Christmas. He wanted to have a winter solstice. But it's one thing to have a presidential campaign, like campaigns when you would go and campaign, but not to have these type of rallies. No other American president. Well, I have to say that's wrong, because Bill and Hillary Clinton attempted this, where they wanted to have an arena tour, where you would buy tickets, but I think they did it one time, nobody came, and it all canceled. But, and then you go after the youth, you attack education. But regarding rallies, this is what that historian said. He said, you can go to a Trump rally as well, and it creates a feeling of solidarity, a community of feeling, which of course is at the same time is a dangerous thing because people then identify with each other. They lose their individuality, they lose their critical capacity, and at the same time altogether they identify with the political leader, so the political leader can do whatever he wants. All right. Now it used to be by charisma. So I saw Bill Clinton speak in 1992, and it's true. If you hear Bill Clinton speak back then, they said if you listen to Bill Clinton speak for 1 hour, 2,000 people, everyone in the room will think they met him. And it's true, he has that kind of charisma. And I saw Obama. It sounds like I'm a big Democratic founder, right? I tried to see George Bush, but he didn't show up. But I saw Obama, and Obama had that charisma. And somehow Hitler did too, but it's a different version. All right. Yeah, this shutting down the Department of Education. I mean, that Reagan wanted to do that. I don't think it was for the same reasons. But this attack on universities are beacons of free speech. If you go to Harvard University, there's a square, which is actually a triangle, and anyone can go down there and speak on anything they want, all right? And that's what it's supposed to be all about. Now, my free speech cannot threaten you, and it cannot be hate speech, which is ironic because my Holocaust survivors always hated hate speech laws. They said that hate speech laws control free speech, and that's how the Nazis all got started. So they defend your right to be a Nazi and defend the right for Mein Kampf to be published. That's really hard. This is this attack, and you've seen many of them, and threatening with imprisonment. And now Columbia University has succumbed at Harvard. I read today that Harvard won't. They're threatening Harvard. I don't know. This is the issue with the Smithsonian. Well, I mean, I don't think I'm running out of time, but as far as education, if you were a school teacher in Nazi Germany, you had to be a party member. If you weren't, you lost your job. More school teachers joined the party than any other profession. They controlled the textbooks, and they indoctrinated with the Hitler Youth and the League of German Girls. Today, Trump has laws to change, like the President's Advisory Commission says that now slavery is going to be defined as this. Slavery was, quote, a challenge to Americans' principles, quote, denial of core American principles, quote, the attempted substitution of a theory of group rights in their place. That's how you're supposed to teach slavery now. 5 states have passed laws to direct and restrict discussions in the United States history classrooms. 12 more are considering it. Texas and Tennessee laws specify what teachers may or may not say in class. That's alarming. And then I just hear so much biblical things, and when you tie the Bible in, you know, when Mike Pence was going to be the running mate, his wife went and said there's absolutely no way that you can be involved with that individual. He's the least Christian person, and Pence said that he's pro-life, and Pence's wife agreed to it on that. But you can see when it says love Germany above all else, and your ethnic comrade is yourself, that's clearly biblical. And it used no 1,000-year Reich, 1,000 years, that's biblical. You know, that's what they would use in the Bible to mean forever, right? I mean, I went to Catholic school my whole life. I mean, I went to Catholic grade school, high school, college, graduate school. You do not write the Bible. And when you sell the Bible for profit, and then when you know, the Bible, if you're not Christian, you believe is the living Word of God. And when you put the Declaration of Independence in the Bible, that's man's word. So you're immediately being sacrilegious to the Word of God. And then when you autograph Bibles, that's putting you equal with Jesus. I mean, I contacted my friend who's a priest. I said, am I accurate? Can I say this when I go to this thing? And he said, yeah, you can say that. So selling these Bibles, and I looked it up. It's I think they're like $70, but you can buy it for $350. He'll autograph it for you. If that's not a threat to your Christianity, and you know, I'm sorry, we're all adults here, right? There's no kids here. Are you in high school?
Yeah.
All right. Can I say something in front of you? My students are extra credit whores. I mean, they will do anything for extra credit. Right? And I hate extra credit. Hate it. Right? I said to them, to my seniors, I said, if you can show me one action that Donald Trump does to promote the tenets of Christianity, I'll give you extra credit. Love thy neighbor as yourself. Do unto others as you do unto yourself. Where's the tenets of Christianity? You know, support the poor. You know, where is this?
How about the commandments?
No, but you know, I mean, I just, you know, that came out one day. So then I get an email. Did you say this in class? Yeah, I said it. But Hitler was raised Catholic. Most of the Nazis were raised Catholic. Hitler did not like Catholicism, but they tied Christianity throughout their philosophy and ideology. I don't know anyone's Catholic, but he had a emissary go to the Vatican, and the Pope, I think it's called the Concordat, the Pope basically blessed Hitler, and so that meant that the Catholic Church could stay open in Germany and they could keep making money, and the Pope did nothing. The Pope did nothing. And the Catholic Church won't allow their libraries to be open to be studied, and they say that the Pope was doing things behind the scenes to undercut Trump. But you know, I don't know if you're Catholic, but if the Pope comes out tomorrow and says that you have to bow at a certain prayer or put your hands up at a certain prayer, everyone will do it. If the Pope came out and said every Catholic has to do one thing to help a Jew, just one thing, make a sandwich, do anything. I'm not saying pick up a gun and fight a Nazi, but you saw something different. That's biblical. To draw paintings like that. And I was going to put the Trump cards up here, the baseball cards, but I don't want to waste your time. But several of them look biblical to me. They look biblical. Lebensborn, this is where it's going to get unique. All right. You know J.D. Vance is fixated on increasing our birth rate. All right, they want babies, all right? And so in Nazi Germany, you could have, it's like the Olympics. You were a gold mom if you had like 8 babies, and you had 7 babies, you could be a silver mom and 6 babies. And that's one of the reasons why they were doing, if you read Lilac Girls, it's one of the reasons why they were doing the experiments on women in Holocaust camps, because they were trying to control multiple birth. It wasn't just Frankenstein experiments, but they were trying to control multiple birth. So there's the medals you could wear, moms could wear if they had babies. All right, and what I'm about to tell you is going to blow your mind. Do you guys know ABBA?
Yeah.
Do you know the blonde girl in ABBA?
Yeah.
She was created by the Nazis. All right, so I have a friend, she's not alive anymore, but she grew up in Nazi Germany, 2nd grade through her senior year in Berlin. And I used to call her, when I would read wild stuff, I would call her, I'm like, is this true? So I read this thing, and they had the Spring of Life program, all right? So what they wanted was, I always pick someone to be pregnant in class, so you're like a junior in high school. You could go to the Reich Chancellery and you could sign up for the Spring of Life program, which you would be impregnated by an SS officer. And then you would wear a tunic with a swastika on your womb, and you would go to high school, and then you would give this baby, you have this baby, and then you would give your Nordic Aryan baby to an SS family that was childless. You got that? And I read that, and I called my friend, and I was like, is this really true? She goes, oh yeah. She goes, there's 2 girls in my high school that did that. And then the school orders you to consider them virgins after they're done. So they're still virgins, but that's called the Spring of Life program. So then when they took over Nordic countries, they took homeless girls and they put them like in a hospital hotel type thing. And if you were an SS, high-ranking SS that had multiple children, you would go there and you would impregnate these blonde, blue-eyed Nordic homeless girls, peasant girls. And then they would have babies, and those babies would go to SS families. That's ABBA. That's her. And her mother was a peasant girl who was impregnated by a Nazi officer. And you know, this childless cat lady nonsense. If we want a healthy ruling class, we should have people that actually have kids. That's a big thing in fashion. Really alarming to me. That was alarming to me. Hitler was Time Man of the Year, and I'm not making this up, but this was his Time Man of the Year that he had in his office for, I don't know, like a decade. Time actually contacted him and said, take that down. He was never Man of the Year. He made it up. That's fake. He's fake. So now he is Time Man of the Year. And Hitler wanted a Nobel Peace Prize. And you know, Trump's campaigning actively for a Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, I sit by myself in my own mind going, are these parallels? Because I know this before. I've seen this before. So this is what happens. When you have smart people that abdicate what they know, their faculties, in favor of politics based on, you know, faith and hope that you get your job and your wallet, but hatred of something else and self-regard for yourself over other races, that's scary, and that's how it happens. And I just put this up here to show you bystanders, because this is a big thing for me. I personally have been against this. I don't believe in bystanders. In Holocaust studies, they talk about bystanders. I don't believe in it. I never did. And I'm being proven in time. So for 30 years, I've been saying there's no such thing as a bystander. If you see something you know is wrong, all right, you have a limited shelf life of your bystanderness. So if it's a couple hours or maybe 2 weeks, and maybe you go home in 2 weeks and you know it's wrong, and you don't do anything about it, you're a collaborator. You're a collaborator. So there's no such thing as bystander. I don't buy it. I never did. Robert Paxton is a great historian, and he said, he was asked, is Trump a fascist? And that's why I gave you those definitions, because these words are being mangled. Just look in the politics, you know. Trump is not a Republican, not by definition, all right? So Democrat, Republican, socialist, communist, fascist, these words are mangled in definitions. They're just not representing. I mean, you know, 50 years ago, the word gay meant you're happy. It means something completely different now. And that's what's happening to these words. So Robert Paxton made a point. He said, quote, of course Trump is a fascist. It's fine to compare him to Mussolini and Hitler, but there was a larger point. It took some luck for those two to come to power. The Trump phenomenon looks like it has much more solid base, which neither Hitler or Mussolini had. He said, but I think we've learned is the institutions that protect us are fragile. History suggests that all democracies are fragile. So we have to be on the alert for political movements that want to undermine democratic institutions. Because the purpose of democratic institutions is not to put the best people in power, it's to maintain democracy even when the worst people are in power. Hitler and Trump were political performance artists who speak vaguely about policies, make Germany and America great again, but know how to draw attention using jokes, insults, and extreme language. We would never tolerate the language that he uses. I remember George Bush, I think, called someone an asshole on a live mic in the press room. That was a big deal. Cheney dropped the F word, I remember one time. There's a decorum, and you don't do that. If you remember in the Clinton debate with Jerry Brown, he put his hand on Jerry Brown's shoulder during the debate. And that was a federal offense against all the decorum of debating. When Hillary Clinton was debating and Trump was walking all around behind her and walking around behind her, I mean, you can't do that in a high school debate. That would never be accepted. And that gets back to my Monopoly example, because we agree in social contract. So if we're going to debate, we agree. And some of the best debates were Hillary and Obama, because they were both good and they ripped each other mercilessly. But there was a decorum. General Mark Milley, who chaired the Joint Chiefs of Staff during the Trump presidency, has voiced his empathetic verdict to author Bob Woodward. Quote, no one has ever been so dangerous to this country as Donald Trump. Now I realize he's a total fascist. He's the most dangerous person in the country. Now when I read Milley, that made me think of Omar Bradley. And Omar Bradley was the last living five-star general. He was in command of D-Day. And he said this, in 1951, Omar Bradley said that publicly, he said, going to war in Southeast Asia would involve the United States in a wrong war, at the wrong place, at the wrong time, with the wrong enemy. And what did we do? We went there twice. More than that. We don't listen to the people who know the best. And I think hypocrisy is also laced in fascism. Hitler forbade any genealogical research into his own history or origins, and it's pretty much historically safe to say that Hitler had Jewish blood. Trump has promised the American people he'll release his tax returns. That's not a law, but it's a custom since Richard Nixon. Trump said he was under audit, okay? And not only that, Trump has prepared lawsuits at all his prep school and at Penn and at Fordham. If they would release his transcripts, he has lawsuits ready to go, and his SATs. I find that cowardice. You know, George Bush admitted he was a C student. Rick Perry, when he ran, he admitted he was a C student. I find that hypocritical. I find that parallel. But MAGA is not Trump alone. Nazism was more dependent on Hitler singularly, that's my opinion. Both were focused on retaliation for past trespasses, real or assumed, rather than real future plans or policies. That's what I tell my students. Trump is not a Republican, there's no policy. It's not a party of policy. It's not a party of policy. Republicans are pro-life and anti-gay and low taxes and support the military and law and order. That's what Republicans are. That's not what he is. And that's alarming to me. That's not what the Republican, that's not Reagan. That's not Bush. And Trump says that his role models are Reagan and Teddy Roosevelt. He doesn't do anything those two presidents did. None of that. Both preach the glory of the past, real or not. You know, Hitler talked about the great German and Prussian Reichs before, and he was going to do that. Mussolini was going to bring the Roman Empire back, all right? I mean, Trump's going to bring steel back to Pittsburgh, and coal back to West Virginia, and cars back to Detroit. And I think that's hysterical. You know, and I tell my students, you guys are all fired up to get a job in the mill? I mean, that's not going to happen. And then the scariest thing I can leave you with, what if there's another 9/11? How will we respond to that? So, I'll take any questions or criticisms you would like.